The story begins with a quiet morning on the far edge of a research zone where a young human boy named Rian had wandered farther than he was supposed to. He had come with a group of Earth researchers who were studying strange signals coming from deep space. Rian was not a scientist, only a curious helper who enjoyed exploring new places. Even though adults told him to stay close to the main camp, his curiosity always pulled him toward anything unusual. That morning he noticed a soft blue shimmer behind a line of rocks. It flickered like a reflection in water, but there was no water nearby. Rian moved closer, thinking it might be a signal projector or a scanner left behind by the research team. But as he stepped around the rocks, he felt a sudden pull in his chest, like air rushing inward. Before he understood what was happening, he was surrounded by a beam of pale light. His feet lifted slightly from the ground, and his voice stuck in his throat when he tried to shout. The light wrapped around him like a bubble, completely silent yet full of energy. Rian tried to move his arms, but felt resistance, as if the air had thickened. A second later, the world tilted, the rocks blurred, and the bright morning sky folded inward. The next thing he knew, the light vanished, and he was standing inside a room he had never seen before. The room looked metallic, curved like the inside of a giant shell. Soft green lights ran along the walls, and a faint hum vibrated through the floor. Rian gasped when he realized he was not alone. A group of tall figures stood in a half-circle around him. Their skin had a smooth, polished pattern, almost like it was carved from stone, and their large eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. They were the Varkol, a well-known alien race who rarely interacted with humans directly. Rian froze, unsure whether he should run, speak, or simply stay still. The Varkol watched him with a mix of caution and suspicion. One of them stepped forward, his voice carrying a deep, controlled tone. It was clear from the way the other aliens shifted their stance that this was the prince of their royal vessel. Rian didn't know his name, but the authority in his presence was unmistakable. The prince studied Rian as if trying to understand what exactly he was looking at. Humans and Varkol had interacted in the past, but only through official meetings and highly controlled environments. The idea of a human child appearing inside a royal vessel was something none of them were prepared for. Rian took a small breath and tried to speak. I think there's been a mistake, he said, his voice shaking slightly. I didn't mean to come here. The prince exchanged a look with his advisors. They whispered to each other, their voices too low for Rian to understand. One of them tapped on a floating device, bringing up a display filled with symbols Rian couldn't read. Rian knew he hadn't done anything wrong. He had just followed a strange light. But from the way the aliens reacted, he could tell they suspected something more. Maybe they thought he was a spy. Maybe they thought he came with a hidden plan. Or maybe they simply didn't trust humans at all. One of the advisors stepped closer and spoke in a slow, careful tone, as if speaking to someone who might misunderstand. You crossed a restricted energy zone. Explain your purpose. Rian swallowed hard. I didn't cross anything on purpose. I saw a blue shimmer behind some rocks, and before I knew it, I was pulled into that beam. I'm not trying to cause trouble. But his words didn't ease their worries. Instead, the prince narrowed his eyes, studying him with even more intensity. It was clear the prince believed Rian knew more than he was saying. To the prince, every unexpected action was a threat, especially on a royal ship that was already dealing with rising tensions on their borders. The prince raised his hand slightly, signaling his guards to step closer. Rian felt the air tighten around him again as two aliens approached, scanning him with small, floating devices. He stayed still, trying not to panic. He didn't want to appear hostile or frightened. He wanted them to see he meant no harm. One of the guards looked at the prince. No weapons detected. No hidden devices. He carries only basic human items. That should have helped. But instead of calming the prince, it made him more suspicious. If a human child had no equipment, no tools, no reason to be in that zone, then maybe he had come for some other purpose, one that couldn't be easily detected. Rian sensed the tension growing. "Please," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I didn't even know this place existed." The prince stepped forward finally, stopping only a few feet from him. His voice was calm, but sharp enough to cut through the room. Humans do not appear inside royal vessels by accident. Every action has a cause. Every presence has a reason. Rian could feel the weight of the prince's words pressing against him. He wanted to explain everything clearly, but even he wasn't sure what had happened. How could he convince them he wasn't a threat when he barely understood the situation himself? The advisors continued discussing possibilities. Some believed the boy had stumbled upon old Varkol technology hidden on the planet's surface. Others thought humans might have found a way to study their ship without permission. A few even wondered if Rian was part of a test or experiment humans were running. Rian listened helplessly. He wanted to say something that would clear the confusion, but every explanation he considered sounded too simple compared to the complexity of their theories. The prince made a decision. "He will be questioned," he said. "We must understand how he arrived here." Rian nodded, glad at least that they were willing to talk. But as the guards moved to escort him, the prince spoke again, quieter this time, but with a tone that carried across the entire room. "If he lies," the prince said, "we will know." The warning wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The weight of the words themselves was enough to send a chill down Rian's spine as they guided him down a long corridor. Rian looked around at the strange architecture, the glowing paths on the floor, and the distant hum of alien machinery. He wasn't sure if he was heading toward safety or danger. He only knew one thing for certain. He had to keep calm. Panic wouldn't help him here. He had to stay steady, think clearly, and hope the truth was enough. The corridor opened into a large chamber filled with soft blue lights. A platform stood in the center, surrounded by curved seats where the advisors settled one by one. The prince remained standing, his gaze fixed on Rian as if he could read every thought in the boy's mind. Rian took a breath and prepared himself. He had no idea how long the questioning would last, or what the aliens thought they might uncover. But he kept reminding himself of one simple thing: he had nothing to hide. He had made a mistake, yes, but not a dangerous one. If he stayed honest and calm, maybe they would understand. But as the room quieted and the questioning began, Rian noticed something strange. The prince wasn't just suspicious. He was angry. Not loud, explosive anger, but the cold, slow-burning kind that came from deep distrust. Rian didn't know it yet, but that anger would soon push the prince to make a decision that no one in the royal court expected. A decision that would change everything, leading to the moment when he would order something shocking, something that would later be called the unimaginable. But for now, Rian stood alone under the pale blue lights, facing the full attention of an alien royalty, hoping that the truth would be enough to save him. The questioning that followed felt endless to Rian. The Varkol advisors asked him the same things again and again, as if hoping his answers would suddenly change. They wanted to know how he found the shimmer behind the rocks, how long he had been in the restricted zone, why he had come so close to alien territory, and whether any other humans knew what he was doing. Each time, Rian gave the same simple answers. He hadn't meant to enter any restricted area. He hadn't known the shimmer was alien technology. He had been exploring out of curiosity. And no one else knew anything about it, because he hadn't even known what he was doing himself. But the more honestly he spoke, the less convinced the prince seemed. The prince watched him the entire time, his eyes narrowed, his expression unchanging. There was something unsettling about how silent he was. The advisors asked questions. The guards stood ready. But the prince simply stared, reading Rian's face with a quiet intensity that made the boy's stomach twist. Finally, after what felt like hours, the prince raised his hand, and the entire room fell silent. The advisors stopped talking mid-sentence. The guards straightened their posture. Rian felt the weight of everyone's attention shift to the prince. He took a slow step forward, his voice calm but cold. "This human claims he came here by accident," the prince said. "But accidents do not happen where our technology is hidden." Rian opened his mouth to respond, but the prince continued before he could speak. The shimmer he saw was not a simple machine. It was a royal transport beacon, designed only to activate under specific conditions. No human should have been able to trigger it unless... He paused, letting the silence stretch. Unless he was trying to. Rian felt his heart drop. "No," he said quickly. "I wasn't trying to activate anything. I didn't even know what it was." The prince didn't react. He simply turned to his advisors. "Human words shift like sand," he said softly. "Truth changes easily in their mouths." Rian's chest tightened. He wasn't used to being spoken about like he wasn't in the room. He wasn't used to being judged without a chance to explain fully. He felt small standing there, surrounded by beings who were stronger, taller, and completely in control of everything happening. One of the advisors, an older Varkol with darker markings across his skin, spoke carefully. "Prince, the boy may indeed be confused. His body readings show stress, not deception." Another disagreed. "Stress can be faked. Humans can show whatever emotion they want." The room filled with murmurs as the advisors debated, but the prince didn't look at any of them. His sharp eyes stayed fixed on Rian. After a moment, the prince spoke again. "Bring the truth scythe?" Rian's breath caught. He didn't know what a truth scythe was, but the name alone was enough to make him tense. Two guards stepped out of the room, returning with a small floating device shaped like a curved disc. It glowed faintly. One guard explained, "This device reads emotional patterns. It senses if the subject hides anything." Rian nodded slowly. "Okay, you can scan me. I'm not hiding anything." The guards held the device up, letting it float in front of him. A soft light washed over Rian, warm at first, then cool. He stood perfectly still, afraid even a small movement might make things worse. The light pulsed a few times, then faded. The guard looked at the reading. The device shows no hidden intent. Rian felt a small wave of relief, but the prince's expression didn't change. Instead, he stepped closer and asked, "Then why do you still appear uneasy?" Rian blinked. "Because I'm scared," he admitted honestly. "I don't know where I am. I don't know why I'm here. And it feels like no matter what I say, you think I'm lying." The room was quiet for a moment. Some of the advisors looked uncomfortable. They weren't expecting such a simple human answer. But the prince didn't soften. "Fear does not erase suspicion," he said. Rian lowered his eyes. He didn't know what else he could do. He couldn't fight. He couldn't escape. All he had were his words, and even those didn't seem to be working. The prince turned away from him and spoke to his court. "We cannot risk letting him move freely. If he holds information he is not aware of, or if he has been used as a carrier for something humans crafted, we must be cautious." Rian looked up quickly. "I'm not carrying anything. You scanned me already." But the prince continued, almost as if Rian hadn't spoken. "There is one creature that can see truth better than any device. One creature that senses even the smallest trace of danger." Rian's stomach twisted again. He had no idea what the prince meant, but the tone of his voice made the air feel heavier. One of the advisors spoke quietly. "Prince, You cannot mean the serpent." The prince's eyes hardened. "It is time." Rian didn't know much about alien species, but he did know one thing. When someone mentioned a serpent in a serious tone, it was never something harmless. Two guards left the room again. But this time, when they returned, they weren't carrying a device. They carried a sealed container made of thick material, glowing faintly with warning symbols. Inside, Rian saw movement along, coiled shape shifting in the shadows. The advisor nearest to the prince whispered, "This is unnecessary. The boy is young. The creature is unpredictable." The prince didn't respond immediately. Instead, he moved slowly toward the container, placing one hand on the glowing surface. The creature inside stirred, as if it could sense his touch, even through the material. Finally, the prince spoke, his voice calm but filled with a deep anger that had been building since the moment Rian arrived. "If he truly has pure intentions, the serpent will not be harmed. And neither will he." Rian's heart pounded. He didn't know what the creature was capable of. He didn't know what would happen when it was released. But he knew one thing clearly. The prince didn't trust him at all. A guard turned to the prince, confirming softly, "Shall we release it?" The prince's eyes never left Rian. "Release my serpent on the human boy." The room went silent. Every advisor froze. Even the guards hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure if the order was wise. But none dared question the prince a second time. Rian felt like the air around him tightened. He took a small step back, instinctively unsure if he should run or stay still. But there was nowhere to go. The guard stood behind him. The prince stood in front of him, and the container with the serpent was placed just a few steps away. The lid began to rise slowly. A cool mist escaped, curling along the floor. The long shape inside shifted again, moving toward the opening. Rian's breath hitched. He knew he couldn't show fear. If the creature sensed it, things might get worse. He tried to stand still, but his knees trembled slightly. The prince watched closely, his jaw tight. "If you are innocent," he said softly, "the creature will sense it. If you are not, the truth will reveal itself." Rian wanted to shout that this wasn't fair, that he hadn't done anything wrong, that he didn't deserve to be judged by a creature he had never even seen before. But the words stuck in his throat. Nothing he said had convinced the prince so far, and he doubted anything would now. As the container fully opened, the serpent lifted its head slowly, its body uncoiling with smooth, deliberate movement. Its eyes glowed faintly, scanning the room before settling on Rian. The prince stood tall, watching closely. Waiting, everyone held their breath. Rian felt his heart racing, but he forced himself to stay still, and then the unimaginable began. The serpent rose from the container slowly, almost like smoke taking shape. Its long body moved with a smooth grace that made it look more like a ribbon of light than a living creature. Its scales shimmered in soft patterns that shifted between pale blue and silver. The room stayed completely silent as the serpent lifted its head and turned toward Rian. Rian felt every muscle in his body tense, but he didn't step back. Something inside him whispered that moving suddenly would only make things worse. His heartbeat was loud in his ears, but he tried to breathe slowly, reminding himself that panicking would help no one. The serpent's eyes fixed on him, glowing with a quiet, strange intelligence. It didn't hiss or snap. It didn't move fast or aggressively. Instead, it glided across the floor, its body barely making a sound as it approached him. Rian squeezed his hands into fists to keep them from trembling. He tried to focus on staying calm, even though every nerve in his body screamed at him to run. But he had nowhere to go, and even if he did, running from a creature like this would be useless. The alien advisors shifted nervously, whispering among themselves. A few took a small step back, not wanting to be too close if the situation went wrong. Even the guards looked tense, gripping their staffs a little tighter. Only the prince stood perfectly still, watching without blinking. His expression didn't show fear, only a cold interest, as if he was waiting to see if his assumptions were right. He truly believed the serpent would expose the truth. Rian felt the creature reach him. It stopped just inches away, raising its head until it was eye level with him. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, boy and serpent, facing one another in complete silence. Then something unexpected happened. The serpent leaned forward and gently brushed its snout against Rian's hand. The touch was warm, soft, almost familiar. Rian blinked in confusion. This wasn't what he expected at all. He expected danger. He expected the creature to strike or circle him like a threat. Instead, it acted like a gentle animal greeting someone it already knew. The advisors gasped. Even the guards exchanged stunned glances, but the serpent didn't stop there. It slid its long body around Rian, not tightly, not threateningly, but in a loose circle, almost like it was embracing him. Its scales glowed brighter when it made contact with his skin. Rian felt his breath catch. A strange calmness washed through him, as if the serpent was projecting peaceful energy. He didn't feel fear anymore. He felt safe, protected. Even one advisor spoke in a shaky voice. This is impossible. The royal serpent never behaves like this with outsiders. Another whispered, it should sense danger in any unknown being. Instead, it is showing trust. The prince's expression finally changed. Not much, just a slight narrowing of his eyes, a flicker of confusion, but it was enough to show he hadn't expected this. Rian swallowed and slowly placed a hand on the serpent's head. It didn't pull away. Instead, it leaned into his touch, its scales warming slightly under his palm. The prince stepped closer. Explain this, he said quietly, his voice no longer cold but unsure. Rian hesitated. He didn't know what to say at first. He didn't understand the serpent's behavior any more than they did. But then a memory stirred in his mind, something from weeks earlier, something he hadn't connected until now. Rian took a slow breath. I think I know why it's acting like this. The room grew even quieter, if that was possible. Every advisor turned toward him. Even the serpent seemed to pause, sensing the shift in the air. Rian continued, speaking carefully. A while back, before we came to this planet, something strange happened near our research base. A small pod crashed not far from the camp. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a suitcase. Everyone thought it was a meteor at first. I was there when it landed. The prince stiffened slightly at the mention of a pod. Rian went on. When we opened the pod, there was a creature inside. It was injured, scared, and couldn't move properly. It wasn't this serpent, but it looked like the same species. Same eyes, same patterns, same shimmer on the scales. The advisors leaned forward. Rian tried to explain without sounding dramatic. The pod must have belonged to one of your people, or maybe it was part of an older mission. I didn't know, but I remember it clearly. The creature was trembling. Everyone else was afraid to touch it because they didn't know if it was dangerous. But I could tell it was hurt. I couldn't just leave it like that. So I helped it. The prince spoke slowly. You helped it? How? I gave it water and kept it warm, Rian said. I tried to comfort it. It was scared, but after a little while, it calmed down. I even cleaned a small wound near its neck. We didn't know what else to do, so we let it go once it got its strength back. It left quietly. He touched the serpent gently again. Maybe this serpent can sense that. Maybe they have a memory link, or maybe they share something like a scent. I don't know exactly, but I think it recognized me. The advisors exchanged shocked looks. The prince looked down at the serpent, then back at Rian, his expression dark with frustration, not at Rian, but at himself. One advisor said softly, "It is possible. Their species carry strong memory patterns. They remember who harms them and who helps them." Another added, "It would explain everything. The serpent sees him as a protector, not a threat." The prince stepped closer, staring at the serpent wrapped gently around Rian. For the first time since Rian arrived on the ship, the prince's anger seemed to weaken. His voice was quieter, less sharp. "You helped a creature of our kind, even though you did not know what it was?" "Yes," Rian said simply. "It needed help. I just did what felt right." The serpent let out a soft, calm sound, tilting its head toward the prince as if inviting him to understand. The prince took a long breath. His shoulders lowered slightly, the tension easing from his posture. It was clear the scene before him challenged everything he believed about humans. The prince had heard countless stories, painting humans as reckless, unpredictable, even dangerous. But none of those stories included a boy gentle enough to calm one of the most sensitive creatures in the Varkal kingdom. Another advisor spoke gently. "Prince, we may have misjudged the boy." The prince didn't respond immediately. He stood silently, trying to process what he was seeing. It was obvious he was thinking deeply, questioning all the assumptions he carried when Rian first arrived. Finally, he lifted his gaze toward the room. "Remove the guards," he said. The order surprised everyone. The guards hesitated, unsure if they heard correctly. "Remove the guards," the prince repeated. Louder this time. The guards stepped back and moved aside, leaving the space open. The prince then walked slowly toward Rian until he stood just a few steps away. The serpent didn't react aggressively. It simply watched him, trusting Rian completely. The prince spoke quietly, almost as if the words were difficult to admit. "Human boy, I may have made a grave mistake." Rian felt a small wave of relief, though he stayed still. The serpent's presence kept him calm, and he sensed the prince's attitude shifting. "I believed you came here with dangerous intent," the prince continued. "But it is clear now that your actions were not born from deception." Rian nodded, his voice soft. "I didn't want to cause trouble. I really didn't." The prince studied him for a few more seconds, then finally said, "We must reconsider everything." The serpent loosened its coil and rested its head gently against Rian's shoulder, a sign of trust so rare that even the advisors seemed moved by it. The prince took a step back, his voice steady again, but no longer cold. "This changes everything." And just like that, the unimaginable had happened. Not danger, not harm, but a moment of pure understanding that none of them expected. A human boy, feared and mistrusted, had earned the trust of a creature that even alien nobility respected deeply. And because of that, the entire direction of Rian's fate shifted in a single quiet moment. The room slowly settled after the serpent's unexpected act of trust. The advisors whispered quietly to each other, still trying to understand what they had witnessed. Even the guards, who had stepped aside, couldn't hide their surprise. The prince remained silent for a long time, watching the serpent's peaceful behavior as it rested near. Rian like it had found someone familiar. Rian felt the creature's warm weight beside him. Its slow breathing helped calm his nerves, like it was telling him he wasn't alone anymore. A strange comfort washed over him, something he had not expected to feel on an alien ship surrounded by strangers who had nearly judged him harshly. After a while, the prince finally spoke, but his voice sounded different now, softened, less sharp. "Human boy," he began, "what you did for the injured creature, it was an act of rare kindness." Rian shrugged slightly. "It just felt like the right thing to do." The prince considered those words with a thoughtful expression. Most of his life, He had been taught that humans acted for gain or advantage. But here stood a boy who didn't ask for anything, didn't expect anything, and didn't even know the creature's value. He simply helped. That alone challenged the prince's beliefs. One of the advisors stepped forward cautiously. "Prince, perhaps it would be wise to learn more about the humans who travel with him. If the boy acted with kindness, maybe others share the same nature." The prince didn't answer immediately. Instead, he carefully approached Rian. The serpent lifted its head slightly, watching him, but it didn't act defensive. It trusted Rian enough to stay calm. When the prince stood just a few feet away, he said, "Fear not. I will not allow harm to come to you now." Rian nodded. It wasn't that he completely trusted the prince yet, but the change in his tone felt genuine. The prince turned to the advisor. "Prepare a communication channel. I will speak with the research team." Rian's eyes widened. "You mean you'll let me talk to them?" "For now," the prince said. "If you came here by accident, they may be searching for you." Rian felt a wave of relief. He hadn't realized how much he missed the familiar voices of the researchers until now. Even though he wasn't close to all of them, they were his people, humans who understood his world. One advisor hurried to activate a screen on the chamber wall. A soft blue glow spread across it as a connection formed. Static filled the air for a moment before a voice crackled through. "Rian? Rian, is that you?" His heart leaped. It was one of the researchers from the camp. Rian stepped forward, the serpent staying close beside him. "I'm here," he said quickly. "I'm okay." There was a loud breath of relief on the other end. "We've been searching the whole area. What happened? Where are you?" Rian glanced at the prince, unsure how much he was allowed to reveal. The prince nodded slightly. "Tell them the truth," he said. Rian took a deep breath. "I was pulled into some kind of beam, and I ended up on an alien ship." There was silence on the other end. Then scattered voices, some surprised, some confused. The main voice finally spoke again. "Are you safe?" Rian looked around the chamber. "Yes, I'm not hurt. They thought I did something wrong, but things are okay now." The prince stepped into view on the screen. The researchers gasped. None of them had ever spoken directly with a Varkol royal. "I am the prince of this vessel," he said calmly. "Your boy is unharmed. A misunderstanding brought him here." "A misunderstanding?" one researcher asked cautiously. The prince nodded. "We believed he came with harmful intent, but we now understand that was untrue." Rian glanced at the serpent, which rested by his leg like a loyal guardian. Its presence alone proved his innocence. The prince continued, "The creature he helped on your planet. It belonged to our own." His kindness reached deeper than any of us expected. The researchers were stunned silent for a moment before the main voice spoke again. "We thank you for keeping him safe. We just want him back." Rian's heart warmed at the words. He hadn't realized how much they cared. The prince looked down at Rian. "Is that what you want?" Rian hesitated. The serpent shifted slightly beside him, its eyes meeting his as if asking the same question. He felt a strange connection with the creature, something gentle and comforting. But he also knew where he belonged. "Yes," Rian said softly. "I need to go home." The prince nodded. "Then we will arrange it." The advisors immediately began working on the transport process. But before they could finalize anything, a sudden tremor shook the room. The lights flickered. The serpent raised its head sharply, reacting instantly to the disturbance. Rian's eyes widened. "What was that?" The prince turned sharply toward the exit. "Stay here," he ordered. But the ground shook again, stronger this time. A low hum echoed through the ship, followed by a deeper rumble like machinery straining under pressure. The prince's calm expression shifted into one of concern. "Something has struck the ship." The advisors activated a holographic display showing the outer hull. Rian gasped when he saw the image small bursts of energy were hitting the ship from outside. "Are you being attacked?" Rian asked. One advisor nodded stiffly. "It appears so." Another added, "Unknown vessels approaching from the east side of orbit." The prince spoke firmly. "Activate shields." The room lights dimmed as energy diverted to the outer barriers. The ship trembled again, though less violently this time. Rian grabbed the edge of a nearby rail for support. The serpent wrapped a portion of its body around him, protecting him instinctively. The prince looked at the advisors. Who dares attack a royal vessel? Before anyone answered, another burst struck the ship. The display flickered. Rian felt worry rising in his chest. He had expected many things today, but certainly not this. The prince turned to Rian. "You must stay close. Do not wander. This is not the time for fear." Rian nodded quickly, his heart pounding. The serpent pressed its head against his leg, calming him. The prince spoke to his court. "Identify the attackers." "It may be the rogue clans," one advisor said. "They have been active in nearby sectors." Another added, "They use illegal technology that disrupts our sensors." The prince clenched his jaw. "Cowards. They attack only when they think we are unprepared." Rian watched the hologram as more strange ships appeared. They looked nothing like Varkal vessels. Their shapes were sharp and dark, almost like floating blades cutting through space. "What do they want?" Rian asked. The prince gave a bitter sigh. "Power. Control. They believe our royal line stands in their way." The ship lurched again. Rian nearly lost his footing, but the serpent steadied him with surprising strength. The prince noticed. He gave Rian a quick look. "You have gained the favor of a creature even my own soldiers fear. It seems you are not as simple as you first appeared." Rian didn't know how to respond. He didn't feel brave or powerful. He felt scared, confused, and overwhelmed. But the serpent's trust kept him steady. The prince turned back to the advisors. "Prepare our defensive protocols. And keep the human safe. If anything happens to him, it will worsen relations with Earth." Rian felt a strange mix of pressure and importance. He didn't want to be a burden, but he also didn't want anyone hurt because of him. "Is there anything I can do?" he asked quietly. The prince looked at him in surprise. "You? What could you do in a battle?" Rian swallowed. "I don't know, but I can try." For the first time, a tiny smile touched the prince's face. Not a cold smile. Something real. Something almost approving. "You may not know this," the prince said, "but your presence has already changed more than you realize." Before Rian could ask what he meant, the alarms changed tone. A new light flashed on the hologram. One advisor spoke urgently. "Prince, the rogue ships are preparing a beam. A strong one." The screen showed a growing sphere of energy forming at the center of the enemy fleet. The prince's expression hardened. "That beam could break through our shields?" Rian felt fear tighten his chest. "What will happen?" The prince looked at him, his voice low, steady, but tense. "If that beam hits us, the unimaginable might happen." And as the energy outside grew brighter, everyone in the room knew the story was rushing toward a turning point none of them expected. The room was tense, filled with the low hum of the ship and the distant flashes of energy from the rogue vessels outside. The lights dimmed and pulsed in rhythm with the vibrations shaking the floor, and Rian felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The serpent coiled protectively around his legs, its scales glimmering faintly in the dim light. Even though he was afraid, there was a strange reassurance in its presence, as if it was silently telling him he could survive this. The prince moved to a control panel, his hands moving quickly and precisely over the glowing holographic interface. Commands flew across the display, shields strengthening, energy redirected, and defensive mechanisms activating. Rian watched, fascinated, though he could barely understand what was happening. It was unlike anything on Earth. The level of technology, the control, and the way the prince remained calm despite the looming danger. One of the advisors spoke urgently. "Prince, the enemy beam is increasing in intensity. At this rate, it will break through the main shields in minutes." The prince's jaw tightened. "We cannot allow that. Focus the secondary barriers and prepare the countermeasures." Rian felt a shiver run through him. He had never been in a situation like this before. On Earth, emergencies meant storms or accidents, not alien fleets preparing to strike a ship he was on. He glanced at the serpent, which seemed calm yet alert. Its head was raised, watching the sensors, sensing the danger in ways Rian could not. The serpent's confidence seemed to give him courage, and he straightened his back. "What should I do?" he asked quietly. The prince turned his gaze toward him. "Stay close. Do not interfere with the defenses. But your presence is important. Remain calm, and the creature will help guide you if needed." Rian nodded. He wasn't sure how he could help, but he realized that being calm might be his contribution. Panicking would only make things worse. Outside the ship, the enemy ships fired their beam. The energy was massive, forming a bright column that struck the shields of the royal vessel. Rian could see the impact through the viewport's waves of light and energy rippling against the reinforced hull. The ship shook violently. Alarms blared. Guards braced themselves. The prince's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. "Divert all energy to the front shields. Stabilize the hull." Rian felt the floor tilt beneath him as the ship rocked. The serpent wrapped more tightly around his legs, and its warm body seemed to calm the trembling in his own. He realized something incredible. The serpent's instincts weren't just protective. They were helping him maintain focus, helping him resist fear. He took a deep breath, feeling the fear in his chest slowly ease. The advisors worked furiously, shouting updates and adjustments. The ship's systems shivered under the strain, but the prince moved with complete control. Rian watched his fingers move across the controls, seeing a grace and precision that seemed almost impossible. Despite the danger, he couldn't look away. He was in awe. Then the unexpected happened. One of the enemy ships broke formation and moved closer to the royal vessel. It fired a smaller, sharper beam aimed directly at the transport area. Panic filled the room, and the guards prepared to respond, but the prince didn't flinch. He gestured toward the serpent. Rian felt the creature shift, lifting its long body as if preparing to act. It moved forward, its eyes glowing faintly, scanning the space around it. Then, with a sudden burst, the serpent surged upward, straight toward the incoming energy. Its body glimmered, creating a shield-like barrier around Rian. The beam struck the serpent, and for a heartbeat, the room went silent. Then, the light faded, and Rian realized he was unharmed. The serpent's scales shimmered brilliantly, absorbing and redirecting the energy safely into the ship's systems. The room erupted in quiet awe. Guards and advisors stared in disbelief, the prince included. "You?" The prince whispered, voice low but full of astonishment. "You are not merely a human boy. You have a connection that even I cannot explain." Rian felt a mixture of pride and humility. I don't know how I did that," he said softly. "It just happened." The prince stepped closer, his expression serious now. "Your instinct, your courage, and your kindness. They have saved us. The creature trusts you completely, and in turn, you guided it without realizing it. That is something few beings could do." The advisors continued to work on the controls, but the immediate danger passed as the beam dissipated, redirected safely. The ship's system stabilized, and the alarms quieted. The rogue ships hesitated, clearly surprised by the unexpected defense, and then retreated slightly. The royal vessel remained intact, thanks largely to the cooperation between Rian and the serpent. Rian breathed heavily, finally feeling the tension release from his body. The prince looked at him, eyes intense but no longer angry. Instead, there was a measure of respect there. Deeper than any respect Rian had seen from adults or aliens before. "You came here as a stranger," the prince said quietly. "And yet you have proven yourself in ways none of us expected. You are human, yes, but your actions show wisdom, courage, and understanding that surpass many of our own." Rian felt warmth rise in his chest. He had never thought of himself as brave or wise. He had only tried to do what felt right. Yet here he was, recognized not just for surviving, but for making a difference. The prince turned to the advisors. "Prepare the communication link with Earth. The boy's team must know he is safe. They must understand the importance of what has happened here." Rian stepped forward, the serpent still coiled protectively around him. He looked at the prince. "Thank you," he said simply. The prince nodded. "No, thank you, human boy. You have taught us that courage and kindness can bridge worlds. Even beings who seem completely different can understand one another if they act with honesty and care." The communication link activated, and Rian's researchers appeared on the screen, faces full of relief and joy. They asked questions quickly, but Rian calmly explained what had happened at the beam. The ship, the rogue vessels, and most importantly, the serpent and its trust in him. The researchers listened in disbelief, then slowly smiled. One said, "We can't believe you did all that. We were so worried." Rian nodded, his eyes reflecting both relief and pride. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "The creature helped me. And it seems the prince trusts me now, too." The prince watched the interaction quietly. He finally spoke, addressing both Rian and the researchers. "Your human has shown qualities that even my advisors did not expect. He has earned a place of respect here." Rian felt his cheeks warm. He had never expected such words, and he realized that in this moment he had done something bigger than survival. He had built trust, shown courage, and even helped prevent disaster. The prince then made a decision. The boy will return to his people safely, and when he leaves, we will remember this day as proof that even small actions, born of kindness and courage, can have enormous consequences. Rian felt a mix of emotions: relief, gratitude, and a deep understanding that this experience had changed him forever. He looked down at the serpent one last time. It lifted its head, eyes meeting his, as if acknowledging their bond. Rian reached out, touching its head gently. "Goodbye, my friend," he whispered. The serpent coiled around him one last time, protective and comforting, before retreating to the container now prepared for transport. Rian stepped back as the prince activated the human transport. The chamber filled with light, and a gentle hum surrounded him. Before he knew it, he was moving, floating toward home, leaving the royal vessel behind. When he arrived back at the research base, he was greeted with cheers and hugs. The researchers were overjoyed to see him safe, but Rian noticed something had changed within himself. He felt more confident, stronger, and aware of the impact one person's choices could make. Later, he would tell the story many times: the ship, the prince, the serpent, and the danger from the rogue vessels. But what he remembered most clearly was the trust he had earned and the courage he had discovered within himself. The prince and the VR. Cole would remember it too, as a day when a human boy, small and ordinary in many ways, had done something extraordinary. His kindness had bridged a gap between species, his courage had saved a royal vessel, and his heart had changed the course of events in ways no one could have predicted. And in the quiet moments afterward, when the hum of the royal vessel faded from memory, Rian realized that the unimaginable What he once feared had turned into something remarkable. He had survived, yes. But more than that, he had proven that humans, even the youngest among them, could make a difference in worlds far beyond their own, and that knowledge stayed with him forever.